Once again, this is a rather long, rather long run to the next boss. So, I mean, it's pretty much you just go back the same way you came, or go back the way you came, should I say? So yeah, I'll just speed that up. If you're interested, it's just up here where the Ashen Tongue Deathsworn Quartermaster is. Now, he doesn't have anything cool like the Quartermasters currently do. He just has a whole heap of plans for level 70 armor, so it's really not that interesting for anyone who's level 90. But I think a few of these look good cosmetic items for transmogs, so maybe you do it, just get exalted with the Deathsworn just for those, I don't know. Alright, so this is one of the hardest bosses in the instance, if not the hardest. Basically, this fight is... It's a piece of a piece of cake for a DK because not only are you a tank so you can absorb a lot of damage, you also don't use mana, which is a very big benefit for one of the phases, and you also don't have you also have good healing. Okay, so this first boss, it fixates on you, which doesn't do that much, but you get a debuff called Aura of Suffering. Basically, this means you can't heal at all, and you have next to no armor, or next to no physical damage resistance of any kind. That's not that much of a problem given how much health level 90s have, but it can be a bit of an issue for anyone who can't burst this boss down, or this phase down, exceedingly quickly. This is a 3-phase fight, it's very simple, you just kill each boss. There's a ad phase in between, or a kind of mini ad phase in between each fight, and if you stand near the ads when they die, you'll get health from them. So here I am, I've almost done the first phase, which really is not the big problem for anyone. It's just basically how much or how well can you just tank stuff. So here's the transition phase. That's a bit brutal, draining 3,000 mana every 3 seconds when you're in combat. I suppose that at 90 that's not that much of an issue, but I haven't done this on a mana class in a fair while, so I wouldn't know. As you can see, I'm killing these things quite easily. I'm getting healed for a fair amount as well, like 45k a tick, which is nice. So that's healing me to full. Not that I needed it because I'm a DK. And now you wait for phase 2, which has just happened. Okay, phase 2 is the Essence of Desire. This one is you take damage when you deal damage, which is a real issue for classes that can't heal themselves. As you can see, I'm taking a large amount of damage. And this boss also decreases mana over time. So the problem, as you can see, DBM will give you an amount of time till your mana reaches 0. Basically, if this happens and you're a caster class, you're pretty much screwed. There's no way you can down the boss then. Aside from that, the boss does 2 things. It will Spirit Shock you, which you can interrupt, although it's a very fast cast time, and given that I live in Australia on American servers, I don't have the reaction times to be able to do it. So that will basically cause you to run around in confusion for 5 seconds, which isn't that much of an issue. The boss does a fair amount of damage, but it's not too bad. You can live through it as a tank. Other classes can as well, it's just a bit iffy. And then it will... the other ability the boss uses is Deaden, which basically just gives the boss a 45k, not 45k, 50k shield, which isn't that bad. If I'm not mistaken, you can dispel it, which is nice, I suppose. And that's all there really is to this phase. It's a lot more healing intensive than the first phase, even though you don't have any healing in the first phase. Because the damage it deals to you is proportionate to the damage you deal. So given that you're level 90 and hitting for large chunks, just be careful that you don't hit too or deal too much and just get way out and just get blown up by your own damage. As you can see, I've pretty much downed the boss now, and I will be moving on to phase 3. Okay, so we're back into the transition phase now. More just those spirits will spawn. If you're a class that can't really heal, for example, I did this on my mage, which is actually kind of easy, presuming you have enough damage to down the second stage before you run out of mana. You should be fine, because you just have a whole heap of abilities which can basically heal your shield damage, which is nice. Okay, so phase 3 is coming. You just need to wait till the boss spits out of its cage, whatever that thing is. Okay, phase 3. Basically, this is just a fun, oh, I can do big numbers fight. As you can see from that debuff, the shadow damage, it deals shadow damage every, I suppose it's every second, and it'll ramp up over the fight, but you get to deal more damage over time. Which is very nice. You can do some big numbers on this fight. And that's actually the entire fight. Like, as you can see, I'm hitting for way more. Like, I'm hitting for 67k's, no crits, which is very nice as a blood DK. I've got a ridiculous amount of shield. You kind of probably shouldn't take that much damage. I mean, you'll take the magic damage, but aside from that, you won't take any damage during this phase. And here is phase 3 and the boss down. Okay, so the path to the next boss is, once again, you kind of have to backtrack on yourself, which seems to be a recurring theme in this raid. It's kind of just, like, there's a whole heap of trash which, once again, you can avoid, but if you have no way to stealth or something, you have to kill it, which, I mean, whilst it's not too bad, it's just annoying. Yeah, aside from that, it's a fairly simple run. You just head straight ahead and then turn left at the very end of the hall. So I'll speed up the video till then. Alright, so this is boss number 6, I believe, Gurtogg Bloodboil. Once again, there's no real difficulty as a tank here. Like, I'm playing on pretty much the most easy mode class there is for soloing old content. It's just a case of you need to just be able to, like, sustain if you're a blood DK. This is basically a DPS race if you're anything that isn't a tank. The boss will have this stacking debuff on you, which can get very brutal, like up to 30k a tick if you have low DPS. I mean, it'll probably go higher than that, I'm not sure. I think because, like, most of my toons can just burst this boss very quickly. When I did it on my Hunter, which I couldn't actually complete it on, I only got up to about 30k, and I was just like, the damage was just too much for me. He'll also give you this debuff, or this, like, CC, which just is confusion. You just run around and for, like, 5 seconds or whatever it is. He also does this, Acidic Wound, which is another stacking debuff, reducing armor. It's basically what the tank swap debuff was back when this was still current content. As you saw, he also had Acidic Breath, which is just, once again, another dot. Okay, so it's the confusion is actually 8 seconds long, which doesn't really matter either way for me. But it is an issue for classes that can't burst this boss down really quickly, and he does have a fair amount of health for a boss at this level. I mean, 4 million's actually a fair amount. I think it's like the most in the entire instance except for Illidan. I may be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Aside from that, he doesn't have any real tactics. You can just, like, tank him. So I'll speed up the rest of the fight. Alright, now that you've completed Gurtogg Bloodboil, you have to finish 3 more bosses before the end of the instance. The path to the next boss is, once again, a backtrack. And really there's a bit of unavoidable trash, although you can just shadow meld to, like, dodge part of it. So, yeah, that's basically it. Here we are at the next boss, Mother Sharhaz. Sharhaz? I don't know, but either way, it's a very simple boss. There's no real tactics here. Like, she does a bit of damage, but it's not overly, or it's not a large amount of damage, so you can just ignore it. She will occasionally enrage, if I remember correctly. And she will also periodically change a debuff on you, which will increase a School of Magic damage by a certain amount, or by 25%, sorry, and decrease the opposite to that by 25%. So here I've got the Prismatic Aura Frost. Its frost damage done is reduced by 25%, but fire damage done was increased by 25%. She will also, every now and then, she will silence you for 10 seconds, which can be a fair issue for casters, but presuming you have a bit of sustain and a good amount of damage, you should have no issue clearing this boss. As you can see, I'm still getting affected by the silence a bit, as it's stopping my blood boils and death and decays from being used whenever I want, but that's not a huge issue. It should also be noted that with all the bosses I've currently talked about, I haven't actually mentioned when you should pop your cooldowns. Like, all the bosses so far haven't actually been an issue for me with cooldowns. Like, I can pop them whenever and it doesn't really matter. The final boss, there is a point when you should be popping your cooldowns, so I will explain that there, but for every other fight, it doesn't really matter when you pop your cooldowns. I mean, I suppose it matters for the Reliquary of Souls. You should probably pop them on the... if you're a caster, you should probably pop them on the second phase when you really need to get that boss down before your mana runs to 0. But then again, that's also a two-edged sword, so you'll need to figure that one out for yourself. Just how much damage can you take from yourself without, like, dying is basically the question. And if it's a, like, large amount, feel free to pop your buffs then, but if not, just be careful when you pop your buffs. Aside from that, the boss is pretty much down now, so just, yeah, there's no real point speeding it up given that it's only got, like, 10% health left. Also, this is, I figure I should probably mention that this is when you start getting the token drops, which is for the tier 6 or 7 set pieces, I can't remember, which items, which will, which is basically, they have real good looks, most of them, so yeah, that's one of the main reasons why people look for, or do this run. This is the final leg of trash you have to do before, or the final leg of trash you have to do in the entire instance. Now, these sentinel things, they're pretty much almost impossible to avoid. They have a really wide aggro radius. So if you can, you just, like, run behind them and you can avoid them that way. Like, if I ran much closer, it would aggro to me, which would be awkward. So you just kind of want to follow behind them, just to see massive aggro radius. Like, but they're not hard to kill, it's just, they have a fair amount of health, so if you're a tank like me and take a bit to kill them, it's just annoying. Aside from that, there's, like, one other pack you have to kill, or Shadow Meld if you're a Night Elf, / Stealth Past if you're a class that can stealth. But aside from that, that's like all the rest of the all the trash you have to clear during or for the rest of this raid. And here we are for the penultimate boss encounter for this raid. Basically, it's a council-style encounter. If I'm not mistaken, this was where the council-style got its name. You're up against or the council kind of got the term, so to speak. Basically, you're up against four bosses. You have them all attacking you at once. There's no real issue on damage in this phase. However, each boss has a special ability. One boss has a big healing ability like that, which will heal all the bosses, and given that they have a shared health pool, it heals them for a fair amount of health. One of the bosses makes the boss, I believe it's the boss you're currently targeting, spell immune, which is very awkward, as generally you want to target the boss which has the big AoE heal, which is Lady Milande, or however you want to pronounce the name, because you can interrupt this heal. But if she's spell immune, which I believe it's the mage applies, you won't be able to interrupt her AoE heal, which is a big issue. As you can see, she's casting it there. I didn't get to interrupt it, and the bosses all got a fair amount of health from that. The other boss, which is, or this boss, Gathios the Shatterer, he will make a boss melee immune for 15 seconds, which is very awkward if you're melee. or a DK in my case. Basically, that's the entire fight. The fourth boss, which is a rogue, I do believe, doesn't really do anything special. Like, his abilities don't matter. It's just a bit of damage. And then, aside from that, the only other special thing about this boss is the fact that I'm not 100% sure on this because I haven't really tested it at all, but to kill the boss you have to deal AoE damage to them all at the one time, which isn't too difficult. As a DK you've just got so much, but this fight is fairly difficult for just straight up DPS classes because surprisingly the bosses do a fair amount of damage, but aside from that there's no real tactics to the fight. I generally focus Lady Milan and then just switch to whoever once she becomes melee immune. And yeah, that's like all the fights, so I'll just speed up the rest. Alright, once you've finished the council boss, basically Akama runs into the room and you have to right-click, talk to him, and just tell him you're ready to get to the final boss, which is obviously Illidan. Basically all that happens is there's this nice little scene with him channeling at the door saying he's not strong enough, then other broken coming around him saying his people are always with him, and it's a real feel-good moment, as you can expect. And then you run up onto the top platform, which you will see, and of course I'm just going to speed this up because it's kind of boring. Alright, so that's happened. The doors have opened. You get to run up here, and Akama will follow, eventually. And you see Illidan up here, and once again you have to talk to Akama, and it'll be a nice little talking scene, which I shall probably leave in, just because I love Illidan's voice. So, DBM will soon pop up a little timer saying how long till the fight starts. Okay, now this fight, it actually does matter when you pop your buffs. You don't want to pop them phase 1. Basically, you want to wait till phase 2, which you'll see is fairly obvious. There's no real tactics to phase 1. I can't even really remember the abilities. I'm fairly sure he does a random jump up into the air and lands down, and there's a patch of fire which you should walk out of, like that. Easily enough done. The fire will deal you damage, so you may as well ignore it. He'll just deal minor amounts of damage, which doesn't really matter as a blood DK. And then, okay, Parasitic Shadow Fiend, which is just a bit of damage. Doesn't really matter. And then, okay, I guess it gets summoned once that debuff wears off, and, like, it died pretty much immediately there. So, okay, here's phase 2. He flies up into the air, he's become untargetable. He'll throw down his Warglaives in a second. Now, they'll both summon a Flame of Azeroth each, you want to burst those down exceedingly quickly because they do a ton of damage. So I'm going to pop buffs here and just focus on one. As you can see, I'm down to... Oh, I'm actually taking damage here. Down to 62%, but I've got one down now, so the damage is a fair amount less now. It's hitting me for a ton, like 38 or 34k. That's very scary. And I'm actually dropping very low here. Luckily, DKs have such good healing that you can just do that and I'm back to full. Now he's just... oh god. Okay. So, I've finished this phase. Once you've done this phase, unless you have really slow, like, damage, you should be fine and you should be able to complete the fight easily. So phase 3 is now, he'll drop back down, and phase 3 is effectively phase 1 really. So I'll speed up the fight for this. If there's anything I've forgotten, I will slow down the recording back to 1 speed. Alright, once you hit phase 4, this is basically game over. You're stunned, that's fine. Different NPC, one on your side, may have Shadow Song, comes along and basically tells Illidan to go get stuffed, and basically the final part of the fight is just you and her fighting him. And that is basically the entire encounter. So here's phase 4, she's now here and helping, so just pop buffs, or pop any buffs you have left, and yeah, that's the entire fight. Overall, the entire raid is actually fairly easy. There are quite a few bosses which require you to be, like, decent. I mean, I've managed to complete this on a mage and on a paladin and on my DK obviously, but I haven't been able to finish that on my hunter, but that just could be because my hunter's undergeared. So presuming you can deal with the Reliquary of Souls and the Gurtogg Bloodboil encounters, you should be able to complete the entire raid, and I'll leave, and that's basically my summing up of this raid, and we'll just see what Illidan drops, and then that's the end of the raid. Okay, just as an aside, I got the Bulwark of Azzinoth, which is one of the better looking shields in the entire game. As you can see, it looks very nice there. Unfortunately, I'm a DK, so I can't wield shields. Anyway, this has been interesting. This has been the Black Temple. Bye.